love to know a little bit about who are the ideal employees in those early days to surround yourself with.
There's MacGyvers and there's the wolf. MacGyver can do everything with a little bubble gum, and none of it will last very long. As soon as MacGyver leaves the set, the contraption collapses, right? You have that hacker mentality. A lot of these great Israeli startup guys who could just make something stand up really fast and react, and you're like, oh my God, it's like, don't touch it. And then you got the wolf who's like, my only job is to bury bodies. That's all I do. I bury bodies, chip them up. You'll never find them. You need to get started with a MacGyver, but as soon as you've got it the way you want it, you're never going to get from capable to under control with MacGyver. You need the wolf. You need to figure out, what am I going to, I need a platform team who are close to the metal and love precision. And you can't imagine what they're doing all day because no features ever come out of them. But the tooling improves and the documentation improves and the response time improves and the amount of compute that you need to do a job improves. If you start with those people, you never get something that a customer can recognize, right? So early days, it's more MacGyver, and later days, it's more the wolf.
Jonathan. So this is a special treat. Jonathan is not only, I would say, an incredible entrepreneur, but he's also an incredible brother-in-law. He is married to my sister, Faye. And so that's how we got such a legendary entrepreneur on our podcast. And Jonathan, I can't ever do justice when introducing you. So I want you to introduce yourself to our audience. What makes you what I like to call one of the best in the business when it comes to building big business, but also investing in startups, from early stage startups to larger ones as well?
I don't know if I'm one of the best in the business, Lee. I know I am a one-hit wonder so far. I started a company with a friend in the basement, with a couple friends. One got to be the co-founder, and then we quickly got 3 or 4 other guys to join us. And the startup kept going. It died, or part of its business model died, but then we found something in it and it lived, and it kept going stage by stage by stage. The whole time I was the CEO, but it felt like a completely different life, for 21 years.
Wow.
I think it was really 21 years. Yeah. 97 to 2018. All the way to through IPO, through over 12 years as a public company. And then as an activist target, where I was, fully attacked in public and canceled, fired. I had the entire entrepreneur journey, including burning to death in the village green while stones were thrown. So I am a one hit and one fail wonder.
Quite a hit, though.
It was it was an idea that the internet would be big, even in healthcare where it wasn't. And we built a operating system for doctors' offices that was cloud native, that was a browser native system for check-in, check-out. It was essentially the McDonald's cash register and back-end system, but for running a doctor's office. And we ended up getting about 120,000 doctors to use that system. And there's only sort of 500 odd, 600 odd practicing, 1,000 odd practicing doctors. So it was a meaningful chunk of all visits to the doctor's office happened on this platform. And we got just a wonderful wave of goodwill from investors and from doctors, and even from patients. I was just flying home from a healthcare conference yesterday, and I won again, and I had the baby next to me. And so we got talking to the mom. Is the mom alone with the baby? And she's like, "Oh, Athena." And she pulled out her portal and showed me her baby and herself and her husband, all in her little Athena communicator portal. And she was so happy. And I was so happy, and I was crying. I may have had a scotch after dry January, so it hit me extra hard. But it was a great run. And then I put all of the money I got from the forced sale of Athena in a take private into angel investments. And I have no idea whether there's any second hit in those yet. Some of them seem to be going well, and some of them are dead. And then of course I've just, I hope we talk about, I've got a startup that's going very well. Early startup that's going very well as well.
Amazing. What a journey.
And I would actually love to tap into a little bit more of the investments you've made over these past couple of years, because a lot of our listeners are thinking about an idea and thinking about taking this idea and building it. I would love, you talk to founders all of the time and you talk to people that have ideas. I want to understand from you, what do you think is a recipe, not just for a good idea, but a recipe for what makes a great founder? Who should become a founder? Who should avoid it, even if they have that good idea?
Wow. Yeah. Well, let me start by qualifying myself. I'm gonna share my screen criteria for when I make an angel investment.
Mhm.
So what happens is, an entrepreneur finds me and then asks me, and then I say yes. So, and that was my criteria. Now they had to find me, they had to and I didn't call them back. I was like, oh shit, they're going to ask me to invest, and then they got me and they showed me the thing. And sometimes it was so bad that I said, look, can I just give you $10,000 to walk away and you can keep the money?
Wow.
What I found was that once I had made, a big exit, $100 million, I felt so blessed and guilty and lucky. And plus I had just been sort of canceled. So I wanted people to like me, so there'd be someone to not call back again. And so when they asked, I was just like, thank you. And you don't know what will work, because nothing will work. But humans and grit and luck and other things will cook on top of whatever it is. And sometimes that'll work. So, I hear about better screening criteria than mine. I'm sure many have better screening criteria than the ones I just laid out. But the truth of the matter is, honestly, almost there's a few companies that are both working and are working the way they thought it would. But the vast majority of the angel investments I've made that are working are not working the way the founders thought they would.
So that's really interesting. And that's also a reflection of how you built Athena, it sounds like. Very agile, tons of pivots.
Athena was a birth center chain. We owned hot tubs. Yeah.
So that's crazy. So tell us more about this. That's insane. Birth center tubs? What? Tell us more. I had no idea.
Yeah. Well, I wanted to be, I grew up in a family where I was wrong, but I believed that being loved was in direct proportion to your good works in the world. That if you had not done enough good works, you were unlovable.
Good works in what sense? Good works in the sense of business or like giving back?
Be president, cure cancer, something noble,
Small little things.
Yeah. And the bar seemed very high. And I was like, God, where can I go? So partly I wanted to go somewhere that was noble. And partly I wanted to go somewhere where none of my cousins had gone, so that no matter how badly I did, I could be better than they at something.
At this.
And
yeah.
So healthcare to me was a place where, I got a job driving an ambulance in New Orleans because I was thinking maybe I'll be a doctor. None of my cousins are doctors, and, I'd love the idea of cutting something and fixing something and being covered in blood and something good happens, but I can still send my kids to private school. That just seemed like sounded like me, I went to private school and I lived in the Upper East Side in New York, and I sort of wanted that. So monk wasn't going to work exactly as I wanted. But what was like monk-ish, but also had a nice 401k. And the other thing was, my dad said, you can never be a public servant and be proud of yourself until you've signed both sides of a paycheck. So you need to have been paid, but also paid someone. And so I was just, where can I do that? And what I found was that everything in healthcare, at least from the eyes of a New Orleans paramedic, was really badly run. And that while I didn't know how good I was at running things, I had to be better than this. And so I was like, let's go where everything sucks, because that's probably a place, when I think of you guys at Ivy, right? You didn't say, I'm going to out decorate the decorator. You said, I'm going to out shit work the decorator, right? I'm going to keep the samples organized and connected to the bill, because decorators not only suck at that, but they hate it. So they're not going to be like, no, I'm going to do it better, And healthcare to me felt like a place where business guys didn't go. You're competing with doctors and nurses and MPHs that, and you might just do better if you're not that good. And that's how I got started. And my first wife didn't know what she wanted to do. And so she's like, well, maybe I'll be a doctor. And then she passed out at the sight of blood. She's like, oh, maybe I'll be a midwife. Maybe I'll be. And so she was studying midwifery, and I learned about the difference in outcomes, which is now kind of a little, it's in the zeitgeist, I think, in New York and Brooklyn. Women are going, we actually do better clinically, as well as enjoy it more, et cetera. And if we're not going to have a zillion babies, like, let's do it all the way, right? And you're seeing a lot of women. So my first wife sort of tapped into that and was interning for the first midwife in New York City to get full privileges to admit at a hospital, Maureen Grayson. And so I ended up meeting her and spending time with her and hearing the numbers. And, the C-section rate was half as much. The NICU admission rate was less than half as much. The wet tap, which is when you have an accident in the putting in the
epidural,
was a fraction as well. I mean, it was just like amazing number. And the total cost, if including hospital days, et cetera, was half as much. I said, well, maybe that's the thing. Maybe I'll, I thought maybe I was going to do an ambulance company, but where the ambulance would treat you and not take you to the hospital. Like, I'll give, for $400, I'll take you to the hospital. For $800, I'll make sure you don't have to go to the hospital. And that's still an opportunity, by the way. If any of you guys who are watching who are healthcare,
I don't love it.
There's a whole new set of laws now passed called community paramedicine laws that allow, in certain states and certain conditions, a paramedic ambulance to treat you and then sign you off at home. And the clinical outcomes and the total cost are wildly superior to dumping you for 12 hours in the emergency room in an ocean of linoleum waiting for your turn to come up amongst car crashes and other things. But at the time, that wasn't legal, and I wasn't going to be able to pull it off. And then this idea came up. But that's how Athena got started. It was, maybe we can bring management to an area where no one even tries to manage, and bring marketing. Let's make it cool to have a baby with a midwife instead of an OBGYN. And that was the original genesis. And a lot of it worked, and a lot of it worked really badly. The administration of it all was so bad that my partner, my co-founder's younger brother, had to come from the Harvard Computer Science Club and build us a website to keep track, to build us our own McDonald's cash register. And after 2 years, everybody wanted the McDonald's cash register. Nobody wanted us to tell them how to deliver babies.
But is that how you knew to, because I feel like some people are so passionate about their idea, they never let go of it. So when did you let go of the birthing center and understand you had to focus wholeheartedly on the tech side?
My advice is give up right before you drown, but only after you've had Wim Hof training. Like, you got to stay underwater drowning for a very long time before you change course. Because if you have it just right, it's still going to feel like drowning to death. So if you skip off too quickly, if you were given an M&M for sitting on the potty, you might have a problem with this, because there is a chapter that I've seen in every venture that's worked that is so painful and so lonely and so long. It's why I recommend, by the way, ladies, that you have a best friend co-founder. That the amount of equity you get by being the only founder is nowhere near the value of having a fellow sufferer, fellow traveler.
100%. We always talk about this.
Lean on yourself. I'm not going to let go because I don't want to disappoint Alex, or Lee. That Todd and I had that dynamic, and both of our wives, I think, had a fair amount of resentment at this incredible commitment as we were drowning, that we kept, eye contact and kept hanging on and trying one more thing. And these women are like,
Mm.
come over here, but that to me is a critical ingredient to finding something with sufficient barrier to entry. Now, there are businesses you can do. You can go buy a Dunkin' franchise right now and not suffer very much at all and do well, take the earnings, roll it into a second Dunkin' franchise. And,
Yeah.
and if you find Jesus, you could get one of those Chick-fil-A ones, Chick-fil-A, whatever, and do even better. They've built the formula already. They've suffered alone already.
Yeah.
And your range of motion is narrow. You can't have the euphoric equity, and you're not changing the world because the world has already been changed, and you're just being a part of you're adding another horse to the traces of a sleigh that is already moving through the snow. But when you do an invention, when you do a 0 to 1, which is the hardest thing in the world, you add a new piggy to the trough of the world that's going to live and not get sat on by the other piggies and die. That is a very hard, very marvelous, very lonely, very ugly, very beautiful thing.
Very exciting. Yeah.
Yeah. And boring. I mean, another 50 no's today. I call they all said no.
I think that's a really good point that you're raising around the different paths to build a business. I think oftentimes, especially in the tech world, we're automatically going the VC, big fundraise route, but there are lots of great businesses that don't require to go through that very hard journey of being an entrepreneur, going from 0 to 1 and raising all that capital. So yeah, I think especially for our listeners, there are many ways to build.
I hear a lot of talk about that, and this is where my Gen X may, get in the way of the truth. To me, it's like, hey, if the VC says no, cut yourself some slack and don't do it. This is going to be freaking hard. And if one of the 8,000 VCs out there doesn't see it, not one of them, go do another thing.
Yeah.
I just think that people are like, oh, I'm going to skip it because they're mean or whatever. I'm like, yeah, they're mean. And if the mean guy doesn't want it, like, you're going to go through hell here. That little mean guy is the least of your worries. Wait till you piss off a customer.
But Jonathan, how do you know, going back to the drowning, how you're saying that you need to really be underwater and suffering for a long time before you take that, before you actually grab for the life vest to maybe go to try for that next idea? How do you know when you should come up for air, like when it's just not working? And I'm sure you talk to a lot of portfolio companies you're invested in where they call you and they're like, hey, Jonathan, I just, do I keep on going? Now what? Right? Like, how do you know when to stop, when to look for that next idea, or when to give up?
It's a good question. I mean, obviously, my first answer was, when you're about to drown, but only after you've done Wim Hof breathing. Like, don't drown. Make sure you're really going to drown, right? What was Louis Zamperini? Everybody else would be thinking they're about to die, and he's like, "But then I lived." You want to make sure you're well past the normal death date. Obviously, the easiest one is that you run out of money and no one will give you more. That's a no-brainer. But for example, with sales, like you should get a lot of no's. Even if you're offered to give away the product, a lot of people should say no. And when you deliver the product, it shouldn't bother you that the only person that says yes is someone, with whom you have pictures, with farm animals naked in the woods or whatever. Like, for whatever reason you get them to do it is okay when you're at 0 trying to get to 1. And if you do it for free, it's okay, and then you've got to build the thing and get it to where they would pay. Another thing, you want to make sure you do is force yourself into a box where at the end of some period of time, they have to pay or fire you. Make them fire you if it's not good enough when you think it's good enough. All of those, it's really a lot about death in a world that doesn't understand or accept death anymore. Death of starvation from cash, death of starvation from prospecting, death of starvation from sort of delivery exhaustion. Like, can I make it work? Can I make it better? Can I make it good enough that they pay? But to me, and you guys, I thought, were watching from a distance, a great example of that. It can be fun. It's not your husband, it's not your life. it's your venture, and you can do your venture right up till death. And you still have love and family and other things.
Right.
So it's sort of a lovely gift. If we were to Ukraine, or Israel, it wouldn't be that fun. It would be like, nope, we got to do it until we can't breathe, and then keep doing it anyway. And there's no plan B. We don't have that. We can actually, our character can die, and then we can go off and live again. So it's okay to push our character all the way past comfort.
And how do you keep going? I obviously we've gone through it, and I would just knowing that there's
Co-founders,
that
lovers,
there is
children,
yeah,
parents,
you know that there's life outside of your venture. Your venture is its own life, and you know that everything else keeps going. But it's obviously hard.
Yeah, my wife, is utterly unlovable in her job, and I love her more than anything. But I know I'm another founder, so when she burns a hole in her laptop 24 hours a day, I get it, and I'm right here, and I'm never going to not be here, because I know that feeling, and I respect the hell out of it. And to your original question, Lee, I mean, I think make sure that if you're going to found something, you're ready to wear yourself down like that, and that you've got love around you that does not associate you, as I thought I was, with your good works, but associates you with your you-ness, so that there doesn't love you for your good works, but loves you for who you are, so that you can lose and be fine.
No, I was going to say, because you touched on it briefly on, if your customer is not buying it with real conviction, then it's clearly a sign that there's not something maybe worth pursuing. But what's the typical sign of product market fit for you? Like, what's that clear, yes, we're on the right track?
Cash. Will they part with cash to keep your product, service, membership, you name it? Cash. And then, I think products go through three stage it, like prototype. A prototype is like, can I, with baling wire and bubble gum, make the thing work in such a way once that a customer will pay what I charge, right? It doesn't have to work for me. It doesn't even have to be repeatable, but can I make it work for them? If you can make that prototype work, now your next step is to make the same thing capable, meaning I could do this for as many people as I want. I won't make any money on any of them, but I can, and I'll be just, putting more bubble gum and baling wire, but I can do it again and again and again, and the customer's results won't collapse, right? Maybe my Hulkin bag, I still lose money on every bag, but they don't fall apart on delivery. Even if I go from 1,000 bags a month to 10,000 bags a month, they all hold together and are still amazingly strong, and blah, 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 right? And then you get to under control, which is that it actually produces a sustainable gross margin to cover your nut eventually at some size, right? So now you're capable and under control. Your process is under control. Your suppliers, your machining, your whatever. And it could be your software engineers, in Zus Health, the company I'm working on now, we pay for data. So we have to cover the cost of the data. We pay an enormous amount for compute, because we're pulling these thousands and thousands of records that are in old formats, and then opening them up in machine, AI reading them, and then taking the data out of them and putting them into a graph. It's just like, it's Amazon's wet dream, the amount of compute that we use per record. And little by little, we get the amount of compute we need down, because we can look at the metadata on the outside of the record and then decide what we need to open. And when we open it, what do we need to machine read? And, we just get smarter, right? And that's kind of where we are now. We've finally gotten to where we're capable and, a little bit under control, just barely to where all the things that go into making a Zus profile, one medical record, your medical history, Alex, we can make for more than it. You'll pay me, or your doctor will pay me more than it costs for me to make it, just barely, right? Now we got to get under control. Now we got to scale that thing.
Yeah.
And that's the way every business I've ever seen is like, do you have a prototype that works? Does one person somewhere actually say, boy, I sure am glad I got my Hulking bag. I can't, and then it's like, okay, that's a stage. We got one bag and it works great. And we're, Johnny was on his belly, stitching, all night to get it to work or whatever, now it's like, no, I got a machine doing it that costs twice as much as the bag. But anyway, and then it's set up.
Right. So with scale, you become more efficient and then you can scale it even further
Yeah, but you don't worry about that.
with the profits.
Yeah. I mean, the nice thing about the modern world is like, unless you're really dense, like you can eyeball whether that, we had a negative 1000% negative gross margin 13 months ago. And I was like, yeah, but I think it'll get there. And people are like, no way, and our price crept up as the product got better a little bit. Not a lot, 20% better price this year than last year. But the amount of compute we pay to do our work and the amount of data that we need to complete the picture, has dropped by 90%. And that's the way it always works.
Incredible. Yeah.
Athena had, I guess, 5 products. Every one of them started as sort of a negative gross margin product and would sort of lumber along. We were capable when we had kind of a 50% gross margin. And by the time we had launched it full on with a 50% gross margin, it was usually about 3 or 4 years till it would sort of plane off at a 70%.
So Athena, right? You built it from zero into a multi-billion-dollar business and then, kind of got kicked out of that. And you are now working on Zus, which you're touching on now. What are the mistakes that you made building Zus in the early days that you forgot about from Athena, right? And also, but what are the lessons that you took from building Athena to Zus?
Can I answer a different question? I don't know my mistakes yet. What happens is when things are going well, you're like breaking your arm, patting yourself on the back.
Yeah.
And it isn't until you've hit the dirt that you can go back and think, oh my God, that was it. So it's easier for me to tell you what I did wrong at Athena.
Yeah. Okay.
At Athena, I think the right way to do a business is to have one foot firmly in the future, in the impossible, in the Steve Jobs magical thinking universe, and really see that magical future world that no one believes crystal clear in your head. Like you can live in it. Like the Truman Show, you can see the postman who still knows your name and like it's really clear to you. But the other foot is squarely in the now. Some cynical fuckface also owns your stock and he wants to know what's happening today for me right now, right? And I actually thought that I was such a precious chestnut that everyone really only cared about the foot that was in the future. So I put more and more and more capital. And, when you're at $1.2 billion in revenue with 6,000 employees, there's a lot going on in the present. And I remember saying on like CNBC, I think that profit is a waste of money at Obama's 45% corporate margin. I think profit's a waste of money. I'm going to roll it into growth, and I can see a bunch of guys going, I'm going to kill that guy, and I just missed it. I heard, I want to say, Bob Iger from Disney say this after I was dead. And he said, you got to have one in the future and one. And I was like, oh,
wow. Yeah, that's powerful.
I really didn't have any feet in the present. I went through multiple CFOs. I was like, who cares? We'll get the right one. It's not that big. Let's think long term, because I was really fixated over here. And that was just a profoundly bad idea.
And do you feel that this part of yourself, this trait of your personality in a way was very helpful in the early days, but then did that change as you grew the company and took it public? Do you feel that the present was more of the focus?
Absolutely right, Alex. That's exactly right. I mean, I would tell people when I was pitching Athena, in the 90s or 2000s, my goal for Athena is for it to be a boring utility that everybody vaguely knows they have because they logged into their patient portal or saw a bill with a, Athena logo somewhere, but nobody thinks of it like the utility, like the company, like Con Edison or whatever. Do they still have Con Edison in New York? That was yeah. So that's what I wanted to be. I wanted to be the silent backbone beneath it all. And I didn't get there. And I think part of it was I didn't think backbone. My new company, Zus, has the same aspiration, but cooperates with all the EMRs, not just, one, and has the data from all the places, not just one. And I am running the company with a foot firmly in the present.
Love
Whereas
that.
in the past, I wouldn't do that.
So it's a trait that's highly celebrated in early stage founders when they're just starting out, but maybe less so as you grow the company.
Yes. And by the way, a lot of your guests and a lot of the companies that are, wondering what happened, sort of having a little bit of PTSD here, everybody thinks they're a billionaire in 2021, and then their head is spinning in 2022, and 2023, they're like sucking their thumb under the table with PTSD. Like, what does anybody want from me? That is because in 21, they misunderstood the message. And by and honestly, we had terrible monetary support with M3. I mean, we were acting like fools from, the White House and Federal Reserve all the way down. So of course, startup people got confused with all that excess monetary supply, but you needed to have a foot in the present. I remember in 2021 or 22, I woke up and I go, oh my God, I did it. I bought in to the nonsense and I had to do a layoff. I did one long before I needed one because of my experience in the past, and said, I'm laying, people are like, why are you laying off? Things going badly? Like, nope. But we're operating like money is coming out of a leaf blower into our face. And sure enough, 12 months later, when it was time to raise, we ended up with a sort of, I think it was nominally flat, but it's really basically a down round, because, and thank God we had done those, done that ugly, needful work. Wasn't needful yet, in the height of the orgy, so that when the hangover day came, we were able to outlast the hangover.
Jonathan, I'd love to know a little bit about who are the ideal employees in those early days to surround yourself with. And that you can talk to both from Athena as well as Zus.
Yeah.
Who are the employees to avoid in those early days, and who are the ones that you just think are instrumental when building a business in those first few years?
Yeah, that's a really good. So let's oversimplify and there's MacGyvers and there's the wolf. MacGyver can do everything with a little bubble gum, and none of it will last very long. As soon as MacGyver leaves the set, the contraption collapses, right? You have that hacker mentality. A lot of these great Israeli startup guys who could just make something stand up really fast and react, and you're like, oh my God, it's like, don't touch it. Don't push. I do it. I'll do the demo. You just tell me what you want. And then you got the wolf who's like, my only job is to bury bodies. That's all I do. I bury bodies. I chip them up. You'll never find them. And you need to get started with a MacGyver, but as soon as you've got it the way you want it, you're never going to get from capable to under control with MacGyver. You need the wolf. You need to figure out, what am I going to, I need a platform team who are close to the metal and love precision. And you can't imagine what they're doing all day because no features ever come out of them. But, the tooling improves and the documentation improves and the response time improves and the amount of compute that you need to do a job improves. But if you start with those people, you never get something that a customer can recognize, right? So early days, it's more MacGyver, and later days, it's more the wolf. And really, MacGyver has no role, over time. Maybe one way of seeing me is that I had no role at Athena, after and I missed it. I missed the memo. Now I think I've evolved and grown up to where I like working in the present as well. And I like stability and things like that. But certainly in my earlier days, I preferred the future work to the present work, and, would have been wise to, become a chairman or, something like that, and let some guy who knows how to who just loves the precision of doing the same thing even better and never differently. I mean, not doing a different thing every day. And I had those guys. I had two or three of the greatest COOs I've ever known. Still to this day, they're one of them gave me when I left a microscope, an old high school microscope, and he's like, Jonathan, try to just focus in a little deeper. Enjoy focusing in, because you're always looking on the horizon. And I still have one of these props somewhere is a microscope from David Robinson, but you need that wolf. You need that guy once you find some product market fit, or you'll never convert. You'll never, or you'll use too much capital converting. I mean, Athena it's a lot of money, but 41.5 or $42.5 million from startup through fail to IPO. So the failed women's center and then the recovery, the whole thing, Zus has already used, now we've got most of it in the bank, but we've raised 70.
Yeah, that's crazy. Is it just different times though?
Yeah, well, there's obviously the value of money in 1997 till today, the liquidity of the venture markets, the bankability of me as a 55-year-old one-hit wonder versus me as a 28-year-old no-hit nothing. So there were a lot of differences, but being shrewd and stingy about your investors' capital when it's not necessary. It was easy for me to do that in Athena because there wasn't any capital. But nowadays, especially in the 21, 22 timeframe, we've all seen people just bathing, washing themselves in capital, just rubbing money all over themselves. You're like, what the, and most of them didn't work. Most of them, I think, will really, really regret that behavior and wish they had a wolf who doesn't give a shit about 2021, who's like, I watch the money and money's tight. Call me in triplicate before you spend any money.
It's so interesting now doing Hulkin with Alex, because just when I hear, just thinking about Hulkin, Alex, if you even want to touch on it, right? It's a family business. You haven't raised any outside capital. It's, it's just growing and profitable.
Well, what's great about Hulkin to me is this is a company that already has got a real present that has nothing to do with bags. Like, you're building industrial inputs with razor thin margins. So you've got a lot of wolves.
Exactly. The backbone is full of the wolves. Yeah.
Finance guys and assembly line guys, and they come in there and that's what happened. There's a micron off on the thickness of the plastic as it lays down to the.
That's all I'm thinking about as you're talking. I'm like, my husband is such a wolf, and Lee and I are thinking like, when we reach $100 million.
You are not a wolf. That's right.
We're already thinking in those terms, but the balance is important, right? And I think you also adapt to whatever situation you're in. I think when Lee and I built our other businesses, I was always kind of more of the wolf, and you were more of that MacGyver type. So I think it does, you need the balance. And I think a good founder in many ways knows how to adapt to that dynamic.
That's right. I mean, the speed with which you all found yourself in 1,000 schools in that the deal between the two,
With
I forgot
Clay,
what it was called
yeah.
now, Clay, I was like, what? How did that happen? But somehow you sort of found the vein in there, and that you got to kiss a lot of frogs when you're finding your first prince. There's no, you're swiping like a motherfucker. Yes. I'll meet you at 5:30, and I'll meet you at 5:40, and I'll meet you at 6:12, and
that's Lee Rodenberg right there. I mean, he was talking about persistent salesperson.
You're finally making out. Yeah.
Oh my God. Yeah. No, totally.
But Jonathan, you don't have a co-founder for Zus, do you?
I do. Oh yes, I do. Ada Glover and Philip Wickline. And
okay, so how do you choose them? Why do you choose these co-founders, and what made you like
the co-founders that are still with us? Are one guy has I asked my lead investor for someone who basically was my not anti-hero, but the anti-me. This is a PhD in computer science with the inability to hear an imprecise phrase, is not interested in allegory, or storytelling, is like, if you are a little bit imprecise, his line will be, I have no idea what you're saying. No idea, like a little bit of a clue. Maybe I'm not, and he comes from, has no Athena in his life. So he came from big data companies outside of healthcare and some inside of healthcare, but where he was either an engineering leader, but he was the wolf. He was truly like, biggest problem, bring in Philip Wickline, and he will cook down that problem. That is his specialty. And so and he has no, whatever charisma is attributed to me has no effect on him. He's like, he has no interest in saying yes to me rather than disappoint me. Which when you have a success, another thing that happens is people, want to agree with you because they want you to like them, because they want to be around you, and that's a huge disservice to you and to them, they to themselves, of course. But and so that's one. And then the other one, Ada, who, is Glover, who is another wolf, sort of half wolf, half visionary, but she's our chief product officer, and she also MIT and Bean and these places that would laugh me out of the room in 5 minutes, but really comfortable with Philip's precision, but also comfortable with designers and drawing and imagining and testing things, structured conversation. So I can't ask a question. I have to just get you to like what I'm saying. If I'm using a question, it's just a trap to make you say yes. I'm selling. I can't stop selling, and it's just my mode of operation. Philip is like, I have to make sure you don't like me. It's my job, or you won't believe me. You know what I mean? And Ada's like, I'm curious whether you like me or not. I actually want to know the answer, and I want to know, is it like a lot, a little? One of the things she talks about a lot is this a grain of sand? Is this a pebble? Or is this a boulder? I get that you like it, but on your beach, is this like this giant boulder that dominates the beach? Or is this just one of a million grains of sand? And she has the ability to dispassionately wait and hear the other person's answer. Which I, despite
Are you still
many
working on that?
hundreds of thousands of dollars of marriage counseling, still don't really do that well. So those are the three.
Yeah.
And we have similar, like we have one of the other co-founders that ended up going back to where he came from, was a brilliant hacker, the greatest hacker, software engineer hacker I know in the world, Joel Turner, just brilliant
Wow.
on the software side. Another guy, great operations hacker, can whip up, was an advance man for Obama. He could stand up the school band and the parade and the flags, and then 5 minutes later it's all back to a Motel 6 parking lot.
Wow.
Like I think of the Village and Blazing Saddles. That's probably too old a movie for many of your viewers, but go back and watch it. They set up a fake town in about 10 minutes to draw the bad guys in. So those guys I thought would be key, and events led to them going back to where they started. But that was the way I was thinking about that feminine team.
So people that were very drastically different from you.
That's right. And some in the future, and some in the present, and some in these connective.
So we're at time. It goes by so quick. You're such a good teller, Jonathan. But I would love to end it with some advice for the listener that has an idea and has been struggling. She's gotten a lot of no's, right? She's been pitching this idea, and she's got, give her pep talk. And then my last question after the pep talk is, what book should she read? If she's about to go out on this fundraising, this founder journey, what's a must-read book for her? So pep talk, with a follow-up book recommendation.
Okay, first of all, if she has time to read books, new profession immediately. Okay, no books when you're starting a company. No books. Work, 7 seconds to make love, fall asleep if you're lucky. That's it. But the first thing, I think it comes from Ross Perot, actually, is he said, count the no's. Count the no's. Love them. Love the no's. Count them up. And I think there was a lot to that. One was just motivational. Like, I know there's going to be no a lot today. But the other is, do count them. Like, how many people did I actually get to where I could ask the product question? Did I get to, like, do you want to try? And how many said no? How many said what? Because you're shaping a funnel. You're really channel your inner Ada Glover. Don't just sell. Don't be John Bush and just sell. And everybody, I'm sure they're going to buy in a minute. Lyndon Johnson said, I can get every vote in America if I get enough time with the voter. They'll all vote for me. They just need enough time. I just don't have enough time. And Perot said, count the no's. He said, no, that some of them don't want it. At least not in the amount of time available. But I need to know the number. Because if it's 10 no's and 1 yes and the product is in its infancy, that's not bad. Frankly, if it's 90 no's and 3 yeses, 4% hit rate, not bad. Livable, especially at immature, because you're down at product immaturity. So to me, the advice is A, don't read books. B, count the no's. And then use that, just look at it dispassionately at the end of the week, and then make decisions based on the no's and the yeses.
I love it. Alex, any final question, final thought with Jonathan?
No, thank you, Jonathan. Such a treat to chat with you and exchange on all these topics. I'm sure our listeners will adore hearing your stories, and see you next time.
I'm available. You ladies are amazing. You're great entrepreneurs, and I don't know which is better, the entertainment value or the business success. You guys are just phenomenal.
Well, Jonathan, just tell our audience, where can people follow you? Do you have a platform that you're favoring? Are you on X, on LinkedIn?
Oh, I know. I turned those off. I find that I like them too much. I've also stopped drinking scotch for the same reason.
That's another great tip before wrapping up.
I'm on LinkedIn, but if I write you back, it's a 23-year-old in marketing. Just so you know.
Oh my gosh. Well, that's so. Yeah.
Avery,
I guess.
Avery Sleeper. Her name is Avery. You can just write to her and say, Avery, can you tell Jonathan?
Watch out, Jonathan. You're gonna be writing a lot of angel investor checks, because now they just know they have to find you, and you'll just say yes.
Find Avery.
A little bit like, how do you know when to stop? With your ventures when you run out of money. And I also know the way you stop angel investing is if you've got no more money.
Exactly.
Take care, you guys. Thanks for having me on your show.